Hey everyone, and welcome to the TSG Bikecast. I'm Steve Tampersoff, and I hope everyone is going well. In this episode, I'm chatting to a dude named Shane Flint. He's the owner of Tor Bikes. He is a steel frame builder who builds sick rowdy hardtails, enduros, and he's trying to get into the dually market. So if you've ever wondered how frames are made, and especially steel frames, well, I got a treat for you. Shane's a really interesting guy. He's a mechanical engineer. We talk a lot about his life, what he was doing in his early days when he first got into fabrication, up to now running his own workshop in his on his property in Beechworth. So he's a super chill guy, loves bikes, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. But before we even get started with that, jump on Instagram and check out his Instagram, Tor Bikes, TOR_bikes, and just have a bit of a look. And that way you've got it in your mind of what his hardtails look like and his dualies. So anyway, enjoy the episode. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the TSG Bikecast. I'm your host, Steve Tampersoff, and this week I've got a local bike maker, Shane Flint from Tor Bikes. How you going, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm going really good, thanks, man. So we all love bikes, and I love bike makers who are really going out and doing something different. And I've been following you for a long while now, and really stoked to have you on the program. And as this is a history podcast, we're going to start way back in the beginning. So Shane, tell us, man, where were you born and where did you grow up?
So born in Melbourne and grew up sort of all over the place. My dad was in the Air Force, so moved every 2 or 3 years, all out till I was 16, 17. So born in Melbourne, lived in Darwin, lived in Canberra, lived in Toowoomba, and had a few years in the US as well.
Right.
So yeah, lots of moving around, and did a few years in the US, came back to year 11 in Canberra, and then Dad decided to retire from the Air Force, and then Canberra sort of became, I guess, home for the next 12 odd years or something after that. So if I had a hometown, I guess it'd be Canberra originally. So I finished school there, did an apprenticeship there, that sort of stuff. Growing up was interesting and fun. It was all over the place. So
yeah, absolutely. So did that involve like a lot of living on Air Force bases and that sort of stuff, or?
No, not for us. We sort of generally just had sort of rental accommodation that was provided by Dad's work. So Dad often worked on bases, but we lived just in sort of suburbs. Just normal sort of suburban living and normal schools, that sort of stuff. Just moved every on average 3 years.
Yeah, right. Do you have other siblings as well?
Yep, younger brother, 18 months younger than me.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, he's it's when we got on pretty well, and some pretty fun times growing up.
Yeah, I suppose you learn a lot traveling and living in different places at such a young age. Do you think that was sort of instrumental in your mindset growing up as well, that you want to see the world a bit more?
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. And Canberra is much different to Toowoomba, which is different to Darwin. And then, living in the US was completely different, obviously. And we moved around in the US as well. So I lived in Orange County, which is just south of LA, for a year and a half, and in a little tiny country town in the middle of Texas
cool.
As well. So, sort of broad range of stuff. And then went to some, going from school in Toowoomba, I think I was in year 8 in Toowoomba, and then did year 9 in Orange County. So you can imagine that was a huge change in scenery.
Absolutely, mate.
Which was awesome. So yeah, I think we and we went really well. We enjoyed it as kids. Even though so we were moving friends, moving away, and then getting leaving friends behind quite often. We were just so used to it. It's something we did all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept in contact with a lot of people as well. And just saw heaps. And Mum and Dad were big into travel even before we were born. So while we're in the US, I think we saw 30 something states of the US, and plus Canada and Mexico, and So we're pretty lucky. That was just pretty cool. We saw, half of Australia as well, just because of where we were living. So yeah, always on the move, which was just a pretty cool way to grow up.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And
Yeah.
obviously, none of you has followed in your dad's footsteps into the Air Force. Was there any thoughts of doing that?
No, it actually never crossed my mind. I was never against it, but yeah, never joining the Air Force was never something I was interested in. Probably had a bit to do with, I think, in year 11 and 12, I was, more interested in having fun and being locked into that sort of a job was just not on the radar at all. I was sort of even studying wasn't something I was interested in doing at that point. I did, went to an apprenticeship after year 12, but yeah, I wasn't. I don't think I was very career minded in year 11 and 12. I was just more about. Actually, back in those days, it was about cars and things that young blokes do. But yeah, no, there's never a thought of jumping in the military. So
yeah, I can relate to that. All I thought about was forward driving, camping, and traveling. So yeah, I can relate to that, man.
Yep.
So you did a boiler. You become a boilermaker. So straight out of high school, was that just trying to find some sort of trade, or did you have an interest in fabrication as you finished high school?
Yeah, I did. I think I was interested in becoming a tradesman of something. I wasn't sure what. I'd done some work experience as a panel beater, and that turned me off that pretty quick. And because I was interested in cars back in those days, mechanic crossed my mind. But I was offered a boilermaker apprenticeship through a family friend, and I'm like, yeah, sounds okay. But I actually hadn't done metalwork at school or anything. I'd done woodwork and automotive, but not metalwork, and started that. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was cool. I sort of jumped into it not knowing what it was all about, but straight away enjoyed it. Fell into it pretty well, and the tradesmen I worked with and the place I worked were awesome as well. So I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the apprenticeship, enjoyed the trade, and obviously still do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Who would have
really
thought
cool.
that in the future that it'd help out with what you're doing now?
That's right. I mean, we'll get to it later, but yeah, I went away from the trade and then I'm sort of back to it now. So yeah, and I guess I'm not doing. I mean, I'm fabricating now, but it's not quite like what I did as a boilermaker. That was some heavier, all day long, big, heavy industrial fabrication stuff, which was it was fun, but yeah, not something when I finished my trade, it was by that stage I'd already realised I didn't want to. That's probably not what I wanted to do forever. It was. Yep. I used to work with some blokes who were in their 50s and had done that all their life, and their backs were blown out, and their eyes weren't in good nick, and fingers that had broken fingers, and all sorts of it just wasn't terribly appealing to do that all my life. Even though it was an awesome trade and I learned heaps, it was I was pretty keen to continue on on another path, nearly straight out of my trade. Which I did. So, but yeah, glad I did that. Got the trade behind me, and I think during my trade too, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I had no plans. I sort of had plans to go to the mines and make big bucks, and then that once I realised that wasn't a terribly pleasant lifestyle either, I sort of turned that idea away. But yeah, I had aspirations of working in the race car industry, which I did a little bit of.
Nice.
But I guess that's the same. I worked with race cars for a while, and it wasn't as glamorous and as cruisy as I thought it was going to be. It all looks pretty exciting from the outside, but once you're in it, it's pretty hard work, and it was in terms of travel and things, it was pretty tough. But yeah, again, it was cool. It was a good experience. And yeah, it's actually probably the second industry I got into after. Actually, I was still an apprentice. So as an apprentice, I got a chance to work with a university race car project, something called Formula SAE, which is it's an American concept where university students design and build and race a car in their final year. And they approached the local TAFE where I was doing my trade for a fabricator. And yeah, I got selected to do that. So that was my first taste of any sort of really precise or precision engineering previous to that, I'd done a lot of big, heavy, earth-moving, bit of mining, that sort of stuff. And that opened my eyes to what fabrication could be.
Yep.
And what another career path could be. So it was really cool.
What sort of work were you doing on the cars? What were you fabricating?
So that project, I fabricated the chassis of the roll cage, also, plenum chambers, exhaust, basically anything, because it was built from ground up, designed and built from ground up, anything that needed fabricating, that was my job. So I think I did that for 9 months from sort of when I first met the students at the uni, and they started designing things. I started slowly fabricating and helping them design as well. And towards the end of that, I was working during the day, leaving work, going to the uni workshop, and then staying there till midnight, fabricating or doing something leading up to the competition, which was towards the end of the school year. It was full on. I was lucky I was living with mum and dad. It didn't matter. I had nothing else, no ties at all. So I was enjoying it. But I learned heaps. I learned about the engineering side of the work that I was doing. Learned what engineering was. It was a really cool experience, and that's actually planted the seed for studying mechanical engineering, which I did a couple of years later. Cool project. So that was the first year that competition had been run in Australia, and It was down at the Holden Proving Ground in Melbourne.
Oh yeah,
a student. So students drive the cars, and the cars put through all different sort of tests and races. So I got to drive in an endurance event as well. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so the whole experience was awesome. It was opened my eyes to the other world, another world of engineering.
How did the car go during the tests and the races and stuff? Did it go well?
Good. Yeah, good. I can't remember where we placed. I think we had one of the smallest budgets of all the teams at all the universities. So it was a strange setup there. I'm not sure if it's the same now. But that year, so the University of Wollongong had BHP as a backer. So they seemed to have endless amount of money behind them. So their car was amazing. Whereas I think we had $30-something thousand worth of sponsorship through various businesses, and a bit from the uni as well. So ours was really low budget, but for the budget we had, our car performed really well and much better than some of the other unis that had a bigger budget. We didn't win. I actually can't remember. We came midfield somewhere, I think.
Nice.
Some cars didn't make it to the first event. They got there and they for whatever reason things broke or the engine didn't run or and that was interesting. At least ours ran. Mind you, we were still working on it in the car park of a hotel, I think at 3:00 in the morning before that event, trying to get a Motec system sorted.
Wow.
Which again wasn't my. I was there helping, holding a tarp over a car in the car park at 3 in the morning. But so it turned over and did what it had to do at 3:00 in the morning. Then at 9 the next morning we're off, and the car was faultless from that point on.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome.
So it was really cool. Yeah. So that car, I think when it did some hill climbing after us, it's because once you've done the next year, students build their own car. So last I heard, it was doing some hill climbing. Someone had bought it off the university, and it's who knows where. It's probably out there somewhere.
That is crazy. Yeah, that's amazing. It's good to hear that it didn't die during your testing and your racing. That's sick.
No, it did well.
Yeah. Wow, that's an awesome story, man. So in that time, like all the research that I've done for this episode, you got into bikes when you were like 18 or 19. How did that whole thing come about?
Yeah, so I always had a bike growing up, but I wasn't into bikes as such. I always had one and rode around. And I played more traditional sports, cricket, rugby league, tennis, that sort of stuff. And when I started my apprenticeship, actually, like probably a lot of others, when I turned 18 around the start of my apprenticeship, my lifestyle changed. There was a lot of beer and cars and sausage rolls and all that sort of good stuff, which was good, but the body suffered for it. And I think I blew out to nearly 140 kilos when I was 20. And
Wow.
I got to the point like, oh, I need to do something about this. And so a bloke I work with rode a mountain bike, and he used to come into work and talk about riding his bike on the weekend, and it sounded kind of cool. I'm like, oh, I'll try that. So I went and bought a $400 giant boulder hardtail, which is, entry level hardtail, and at the time seemed like a lot of money and a big investment. And started riding with a mate from work. And this is while I was in Canberra. So I lived out near Tuggeranong Pines, which is a cool little riding spot in the south end of Canberra. Yeah, and just loved it. Thought it was awesome, and just rode more and more and more. And I was out at Majura Pines one weekend, and I noticed there were people, and there was an event on. So I rolled over and had a look at what it was. It was a downhill race, a club downhill race. And I didn't know what that was, so just rode around, watched it a little bit, and thought this is pretty cool. And I rode down back towards the start line, and just sort of put the bike on the ground. And I think the race director said, "Oh, do you want to have a crack?" I said, "Oh, I don't know what I do." He's like, "Give me $5, go to the top of the hill and have a race." I said, "Okay." So no worries. Gave him $5, went to the top of the hill. I think whoever was starting the race explained the idea. You stand here, I'll give you a countdown, and off you go, get to the bottom. And so I did, and I went over the bars in the first corner in front of everyone. Jumped back on, kept going, made it to the bottom. And and I was hooked on it at that point. This is awesome, and everyone there was awesome. All the people were cool, the vibe was good. It's just, I thought, I've got to do more of this. And so I think from that point, for the next 4 years, I didn't miss a club downhill race. I was doing cross-country races. I was doing Thursday night crit racing. I just went all in and got right into it. Stopped playing cricket on the weekend, which is what I was doing at that point. But I'd been playing for a long time, and to keep going to races, I had to quit cricket. So, yeah, happily quit cricket and just rode.
It's funny because it's usually a similar story from everybody. Like, they've never really gotten into mountain biking, and then they throw a leg over a bike, and the first time they go down a trail, they're just like, "Oh shit, I'm hooked on this." And then next thing, your wallet starts opening.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. I thought I put a set of Marzocchi Z1s on this hardtail. So that set of forks, I reckon, cost more than the bike. So I thought I had a real downhill weapon after that. So I raced a few races standard, and then put these forks on, and kept racing. And then I bought a giant ATX2, which is a pretty iconic bike back in the day. So it was second hand, and it's the blue and green aluminium, big swing arm, single pivot bike. And then that was a whole new world. All of a sudden I had a downhill bike, and I was at downhill races. I had a bike the same as everyone else, and I actually did a bit of chopping and cutting with that as well. I decided to move. I'd seen someone else had moved the lower shock mount on the frame to lower the bottom bracket a bit. So I took it to work one day and chopped off the shock mount and moved it along, and I think it cracked, a year later or something. But that was my first time I sort of played around with a bike. I had no idea what to do, but it was fun.
Yeah,
it did lower the bike. So
the seeds were being sown without you even
exactly.
knowing it.
That's right.
That's sick. So you found, like, I remember reading somewhere that you discovered that you decided that you like to ride ups and that more than big downhill runs, and your downhill bike got to the back of the shed.
Yep, exactly. So it took, I rode for 5 years downhill racing, and I still had that old hardtail, and I was doing cross country races just because it was on. Why not turn up to a cross country race? And then once I'd finished my apprenticeship and I was working, so during this I'd actually finished in my trade and I'd studied mechanical engineering. And in my first job as an engineer, a couple of guys I worked with were cross-country riders, and they were doing, back in the day, this is sort of mid-2000s, the 24-hour racing was massive. And living in Canberra, the Scott and the Mont 24-hour races were on every year, and they had a team. They said, "Oh, you should come and race 24-hour with us." And I thought, "Oh, okay, sounds good." So I thought I better get a bit fitter. So started riding to get fit, which I hadn't done before. I'd only ridden for fun. And the fitter I got, the more I enjoyed it. I thought, this is okay, and went from flat pedals to clipped in, and started heading down that sort of real cross country direction. At the time, though, it took me years to identify as anything but a downhiller. I just sort of I'm doing this to get fitter for downhill, but I was enjoying it, and of course doing better, and the fitter you get, the easier riding becomes, and the easier the downhill you become as well. There was a point there where you could do a full run at Threadbow and be absolutely destroyed. And I figured that after a couple of years of cross-country riding, I could do a run at Threadbow and get back on the shelves and go straight back to the top. It really helped everything. So, so I started taking cross-country racing more seriously. And I was then doing, I started to concentrate more on cross-country racing than downhilling as I got a bit older. To the point where I was still doing the old downhill race, but probably more cross-country, more endurance racing, and going out to find hills and get fitter. So there was a point there where I was doing both, but the older I got, the more cross-country racing and riding I did, and the more enjoyment I got out of it. So when I think after about 10 years of riding, I went back overseas and lived in the UK for a little while. And this was 2007. And the first, I think Super D was kind of starting as a format. Actually, it'd been around for a while, but it became popular. And the first enduro races were starting to be run in the UK and Europe. So I had a downhill bike and a cross-country bike over there, and I entered a enduro race at a place called Kielder Forest, which is in the north of England, and it was a part of the Avalanche Cup series, which is run by the same people that run the McAvalanche. So it was an enduro series through north of England, Scotland, and in Europe. So I was doing enduro racing, which catered to both of my interests. I was still downhilling, but at the same time I was riding up hills. And it was awesome. So I think it's when I bought the Trance. So back in those days, the Giant Trance was that medium travel mountain bike in between a cross-country bike and a downhill bike, but before enduro was really a thing. So I had this Trance and started doing all these enduro races. And was loving that. And then also did McAvalanche at the end of the series. Nice. I did that on a downhill bike. I'd been told that it was a bit too much for something like a Trance, which was a 5-inch travel bike. So I had a crack at the McAvalanche on downhill bike, which is still probably the scariest thing I've ever done. It's horrifically scary going off the top. The year I did it was when there was full snow from the start line right to the end of the glacier. So we started at the very top, and it was horrific. But the glacier is, and I think I'd practiced it 3 or 4 times, and I'd figured out that I wasn't going to ride down the glacier without binning it, and I couldn't ride down without binning it on my own, let alone in a bunch. Yeah. And so I'd figured out this technique of sort of tripoding my way down, where I just had a foot out and was sort of just, at speed, but just had one foot out ready for every time the bike slipped out. Got to the race day, and I think I qualified in the second group or third group. Obviously not fast enough to qualify the big boys, but went off in the second wave, got down the first part of the snow, okay, got to the glacier, and I think in the first 20 metres, I was off. And I went over the bars, let go of the bike, and then slid down the glacier without my bike, just amongst people. There's people everywhere. And then had to shimmy across the glacier. It was too steep to stand and walk on, so I shimmy across, climb back up some rocks, shimmy out to where my bike was sitting, and then sort of dive at the bike, grab it, and then slid down until I stopped, and then got back on the bike and sort of took off from there.
Seems like a common story at Mega Avalanche, no matter if it was the mid-2000s or 2019. It's the same old story, isn't it?
It's crazy. And then watching, there was good footage back in those days from Earth DVDs and stuff like that.
Remember those?
And even those didn't do it justice. It was just a crazy experience. And I did it with a few boys from the UK that I'd met while riding, and that was their first go at it as well. And a couple of them managed to get down the glacier without an incident, and I think they finished in the finishing sort of at least half an hour ahead of me, just by having that sort of clear run.
Getting through the chaos at the start is the key, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's amazing experience. So it was really cool.
Yeah, one of my mates raced mega. I can't remember what year it was. Might have been like 13 or 14 on a Kona Honzo 29er hardtail with an enduro fog, and he said it was wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I saw I think it's Blake from the YouTube channel GMBN did it last year, the year before on a hardtail.
Yeah, he's a wild man.
Looks brutal.
Yeah, he's a wild man. So just backtracking a little bit, how did you get into mechanical engineering? What drove you to get into that trade and go and study?
So once I'd done that race car project, so I went back to work as a job. By that, I think that point I'd sort of just finished my trade and just working as a tradesman. And I think like I said before, I was like, I need to do something different. I don't want to be stuck doing this. So I guess the only only direction to head when you're a tradesman is to become, a foreman or a manager or something like that. And I was more interested in becoming more technically skilled. So once I'd had a glimpse at engineering via this race car project, I looked into studying, and so enrolled in an advanced diploma of mechanical engineering, which is a TAFE course. So I worked part-time and studied part-time, and did that over 2 years, and then rolled that into an associate degree, which is like a qualification in between a degree and an advanced diploma, where you head to uni and do a lot of the maths and some of the courses in the degree. So I did that. So I think that was about 3 years worth of study while working part-time as an engineer. As a tradesman, and finished with that qualification, and then left the trade and got a job as a mechanical designer for a company in Queanbeyan, which is just outside of Canberra, that designed and built fire control systems, so basically military stuff. The equipment and the gimbals that sit on top of Hummers and tanks and things, they designed and built those for various military around the world. Got into that line of work then. So I think in total I did probably 6 or 7 years in the trade, and then moved into an office doing mechanical design, which includes basic mechanical design and CAD work, and all the engineering behind all those things. So and that was the start of a career that I'm still sort of doing now. So this is, that's been 15, 16 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, right.
And worked in that for a couple of years, worked that job for a couple of years, and then went back overseas with my girlfriend then, who's my wife now. We just wanted to go back to Europe. I'd been to Europe once before, actually as an apprentice with 3 mates, and did the young bloke thing in Europe, which was pretty awesome. And then went back to with Amanda to live and work in the north of England, and to do more of the Europe thing, more travel, and worked again in a company in Newcastle upon Tyne, which is sort of up near the Scottish border, for a company designing cable and pipe handling equipment, mainly for the oil and gas industry, which is a bit of a hub for that sort of stuff there.
Right.
That's pretty cool. So that was more mechanical design. And I came home, back to Canberra, and got another job doing a similar thing, another mechanical design work, and once we were back from the UK, we sort of had decided that Canberra wasn't going to be the place to live. We wanted some land, and Amanda, my wife's into horses, and she wanted to live somewhere where she could have some horses and a bit more land. So we started thinking about where we could live other than Canberra, and Beechworth popped up. So for me, it was, I'd been to Mount Beauty a few times racing, and I think I'd been through Beechworth once before, and yeah, I thought it sort of ticked all those boxes. That for me, it had riding, which was pretty important. It was close to some bigger towns for work for both of us, and then as a primary school teacher. So yeah, we came to Beechworth, spent a weekend. Thought, yeah, this is pretty cool. So packed up our stuff in Canberra and down to Beechworth we came. And
that's awesome, man. What year was that roughly?
So 2010.
Yeah, right. So you've been here a while.
Yeah. So just over 10 years.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? Like once you move out here, you're just like, oh, I don't want to leave. Like you just everywhere else just seems a bit mundane. You know, I've been living here 5 years now, and I can't think of anywhere else I want to live but Mount Beauty.
Okay. So, yeah, absolutely. Mount Beauty it's definitely on my list, but I didn't have a job lined up when I moved, and I thought Albury's probably going to be the closest, or Wodonga's going to be the closest town for the sort of work I wanted to do. And it's just a little bit too far for a commute, so that's where Beechworth was, in a perfect spot between two big towns, and worked out perfectly that way too. So we did a year in town, just living in a sort of 2-bedroom place in town, and then bought where I am now, which is on 5k to the south of Beechworth. It's just on 12 acres with some paddocks and a bit of bush. So yeah, Amanda's got horses. I've got a big shed of this, which is I'm in a little part of now. We've been in here nearly 10 years.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Oh, where are you?
And loving it.
I just lost you there for a sec.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it. We're back.
Cool. Right. I've got dodgy internet. That's one bad thing about living 5k from Beach.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's completely fine, man. Every now and again, the bit rate drops and I can see it coming. But yeah, 12 acres. Awesome, man. 12 acres. That's sick. And right near some good trails. Man, yeah, how good's the high country? I love living out here too, man. It's like, it's awesome. Spoilt for choice. So, so how did the seeds get sown to start Tor Bikes? What was the how did it all begin, man?
I'd always thought about, so I've been thinking about, designing a bike for a long time, ever since I was studying, because I had both skills. I had design skills, engineering skills, and fabrication skills. And of course, my biggest interest was bikes. So I thought at some point I've got to make a bike for myself. And I've been speaking about it for a long time. And so 6 years ago maybe it was, I think I had a Specialized Epic was my sort of main bike, and riding through winter, just changing pivot points and things. I started changing pivot bearings, was getting a bit tedious, and just flogging your bike through winter seemed a bit silly. So I decided, this is probably a good time. I might make a hardtail. Just one, just make something, make it just to say that I've done it. So I measured up my Epic. So I measured up the cockpit of the Epic and used that as a base for a hardtail. I made it 1 degree slacker on the head angle, put 120mm treble forks on it. And that was a bike. So I just sort of sketched it up. I did a 3D model of it, which is kind of lucky. In my line of work, I do lots and lots of 3D modeling, so I could model a bike up to get all the information I needed. Made myself a jig, sort of a basic jig, just to make this one bike. Went out and bought some just straight gauge 4130 chromoly tubing, and just with the tools I had at home, made a bike. And I had no idea whether, the first ride was really strange. I trust myself as a fabricator and as a designer, but it's just this really strange feeling of riding a bike for the first time that you've made. But it was awesome. So that that bike I rode, for that winter of whatever it was, 2015. Loved it, and continued riding it. I actually, in the end, enjoyed riding it more than I did the Epic, and just loved riding it. So, of course, riding that around, people were asking questions. I just got a powder coated blue. It didn't look too flash, nothing special about it. But people who knew bikes would look at it and go, "What have you got there? What is that?" And I explained, "Oh, I made it myself." And I'm like, "Oh, wow." And a mate of mine said, "Oh, why don't you make me one?" I said, "Oh, I can make you one the same if you want." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." And previous to that point, I hadn't researched frame building. I made this bike just based on my knowledge. I just bought pro molded tubing. I didn't research frame building or any techniques or anything around frame building. I had taught myself to fillet braze, which is how I joined the tubes together. I did a bit of that, but otherwise I didn't learn any new skills. I just sort of made this bike based on the skills I had. And when he asked me to make him a bike, I thought, oh, I'll look more into this, and discovered bike specific tubing, Reynolds tubing, Columbus tubing, and what butted tubing was. Looked into better ways of bending. I just sort of refined the way I built that second bike. So I bought butted tubing for the first time, bought a bender, overly basic bender, and basically copied my bike for a second time for a mate to ride. And that was awesome. I enjoyed that. And so I'd made two bikes by that point. Still had no plans or interest in doing it, for anything other than a hobby. Mm-hmm. And that year, the first handmade bicycle show was launched, and Nathan Lorcan, who is someone I knew beforehand, runs that show, and I knew him from some of the races that he used to run around Beechworth and others. And so I heard that show was a thing. I thought, I'll research this and look into it. So I got in touch with Nathan and asked if I could be part of the show. He said, "Yep, absolutely. You're going to need a brand name. You're going to need insurance, and you're going to need an ABN and all that sort of stuff to be able to display." I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a crack. And so I designed up another bike, a longer, slacker hardtail, made it, and had to come up with some branding, which was probably the most traumatic and hardest part of the whole bike building thing so far. Trying to come up with a brand, I had no idea how to think about a brand or anything like that. I've never done anything with marketing, any sort of promotion or anything like that. So I had to try and come up with not only a brand, but a logo and this sort of stuff. So I had all sorts of crazy stuff. I'd think of something one day and then sleep on it and wake up and up. That's pretty silly. I kind of didn't want a brand name that was pretentious or had any sort of meaning to it, or was sounded silly, or which ruled out nearly everything. So I basically just wanted a one-letter word that was short and sharp and maybe had some relevance to mountain biking. And I got to a point actually where I was just flicking through pictures and different things and looking through online thesauruses and just trying to find a word. So I came across the word Tor, which is basically an exposed rocky outcrop on the top of a mountain. I thought, that's a nice, short, sharp word. It's got a bit of a link to mountain biking in that it's a mountain and it's an outdoors type word. It's a geological word, and I think this word was sat in my head for a while. And I went to Threadbow, I think that weekend, and was sitting on the chairlift and noticed this exposed rocky outcrop at the top of the Kosciuszko chairlift. I thought, that's a Tor. I thought, well, that'll do it. So I sort of, I saw that word in a mountain bike context, and here it was at the top of Threadbow. I thought, that'll do it. So decided on that name. So I had a brand. I had a brand name, sorry. And then I just had to come up with a logo, which is sort of this thing here. I drew in AutoCAD software. I just had some, pictures of rocks and just tried to draw the word out of rock-shaped letters, which I did. So I got a name and got a logo, and that was done. I had enough to sort of enter the show, and then built this hardtail. Got a nice paint job done on it, and
it's the orange one, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was originally it was like a faded. Again, I had no idea about color. Like I didn't know what to paint on. It needed to look nice. I knew that, so I didn't know what sort of paint scheme to go for. And I spoke to a bloke called Dave, who runs Status Customs in Albury, does some paints like cars and helmets and bikes and things. And I saw that he'd done some BMXs, so I went and chatted to him, and he goes, "Yeah." I said, "I'll leave it up to you. Just do something sort of funky with this frame. That's it's going to a show. Something's going to stand out." And he said, "Oh, how about a fade?" I'm like, "Yep, sure." So I left it with him, and he did that red to yellow to red fade. It turned out awesome. And then took that to the show. So rolled up to the first handmade bike show in 2017, I think it was. And was introduced to the whole world of frame building.
That's awesome.
Which I hadn't, had until that point. I had little exposure to. I just hadn't sort of researched it. And I guess that was the real start of me taking frame building seriously. That show was amazing. Met all the other frame builders from around the country, and got a taste for the idea of that becoming something I could do as a job. And sort of rolled on from there.
Yeah, right. So that first one you went to, the first bike expo, you were only like, there's only like two other mountain bikes or one other mountain bike there. The rest were all like gravel and road bikes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The handmade scene back then was basically nearly all road. And even the other two mountain bikes that were there were from builders who predominantly build road bikes or gravel bikes. And they just happened, they had a mountain bike there as a hardtail there as well. There's no dual suspension bikes. So that was cool to be, the in the minority in a niche, already niche industry.
Yeah, that's cool, man. It's really cool.
But so at that show, I had started thinking about a dually. I thought, what could I do next? What's next from doing this hardtail? And so I spent the next few months thinking about dualies. And so for the next show, I had a 150mm travel enduro bike, and took that along.
Was that the Erode? Is that what it's called? Is that the one, or was that something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's it. Yeah. So again, I had to come up with a name, and I had no idea what to name it. So sort of that word was, related to the Tor name as well, and it was kind of a cool word. So stuck with that. I think it was up to me. I wouldn't name anything. I think I just had bikes, and that'd be a hardtail. That'd be a dually, but it doesn't work in the marketing world.
No, it does not, man. I know when I was putting this podcast together, I was having the same battles, and it took me. I have a massive list of names, and this just came into it in the end because everyone just knew me as that Stoke guy on Instagram when I worked for World Trail. So I just went, okay, that'll do. And then I just went, that's it, push enter, and that's it. That's what it is. Don't think about it anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. You've got to, exactly right. Once I got past that, I realized I knew that I still felt weird about having a brand name. And then once I had it, I was like, right, just forget about it and just go with it. There's lots of other brand names that are probably sillier than that. And we don't think about it. I was sort of hung up on this brand thing, and I just sort of said, no, that's it. Let's stick with it. You've got one, just go with it, and move on with it.
And it all sorts to become its own anyway, as it goes along. It all just feels like it's right in its place. Just takes a bit to get used to it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did your full suspension bike go? What was the reaction at the next show?
Yeah, it was good. It took me. I had no idea about suspension kinematics. I knew some stuff about race car suspension before that, and there's a lot of crossover between the two. So I sort of just educated myself on mountain bike kinematics, and tried to get my head around it before I designed a bike, and just sat down, and a few months after that first show, I thought, I'll start drawing this up, start getting a design on paper. First step was get my head around kinematics, and then get that into what looks like a bike. So I'd had some kinematic numbers that I sort of wanted to hit in terms of things like anti-squat, anti-rise, and that sort of stuff. And I started with the most basic form of suspension, which is the sort of rigid single pivot, which I've got now. And I think I didn't think I was going to stay with that design, because when you research this stuff, single pivot designs have a bit of a bad rap. But once I got into it, I realized that a lot of what I'd read about things like excessive brake jack and the downside of linear suspension wasn't as bad as what I'd been reading, and I was able to sort of design in and get a suspension design that worked really well and hit the numbers that I thought were right, and it also made it quite easy to fabricate. So I sort of committed to that single pivot design, and I made the first one. It was in December of that year, and I went away. So every December, we have a bit of a boys trip. It's about 10 of us from Beechworth do a trip somewhere, and it could be anywhere from Rotorua to Derby, Medina, all over the place. We sort of have a trip every year. And so I set myself a goal to make that frame, which is that one over my shoulder there, actually.
Yep.
And take it to Tassie as the first test. Got that made. Hadn't ridden it anywhere other than around sort of the shed before I put it in the box to head to Tassie. And I knew in my head, exactly. And I had confidence in what I'd done, because all the numbers worked and the fabrication went well, and the bike came together really well. But I had no idea that, you don't know how it's going to ride. So I jumped on it and in Derby and rode up the main street and started climbing, and just hoping it was going to work as I thought it was going to, and it did. It worked really well. So I rode it. I didn't even have any cable routing points on it. I just had it all cable tied onto the frame at that point. Just riding raw steel. So it was nice and shiny raw steel at the start of the week, and was just rusted brown by the end of the week. But it performed really well. It rode well and rode as I thought it would, and I sort of tweaked things as I rode over the weekend. And the last couple of days of that trip were in Medina, and that was the first year Medina Open. That's where it really, really came alive there. So first 2 or 3 runs down Medina, I was like, yep, I've nailed this. The bike rode awesome. So I rode that through that December, January, and there were a few things on the fabrication side I wanted to change. So I only rode that 2 or 3 months, and I built a second one. And that second one is what I took to that show. Got it painted, and took it to the show. It was just tidier in terms of fabrication, and I used some different tubing and stuff. But in terms of the kinematics and the design of the suspension, it was the same as that first one. And took that to the show. And it was received well. It's a funny audience at the handmade show. You've got people who are real road aficionados, and they've never seen a mountain bike before. And I was doing demos of the dropper post quite often. They'd come up and like, oh, what's this C post all about? I'm like, oh, it's a dropper post. I'm like, oh wow. And you move the post, and it blew people's mind. And then the next person that came up could be a really educated mountain biker, and they start asking questions about suspension. So like, right, so you have to sort of change gear and get into the nitty gritty and talk about mountain bike specific stuff, suspension stuff and fabrication stuff. So it was received really well, and it blew a lot of people's minds, because I think It was the first dually at the show, and that year there was actually another dual suspension bike from the US there as well. So both of our bikes were pretty impressive.
That's awesome.
All were impressing people. Yeah, so yeah, it was well received.
So that's the end of part one. I hope you really enjoyed that. I hope it gave you a bit of insight into how frames are made, especially steel frames. We'll continue on our chat in part two next week. And please follow Shane at Tor Bikes on Instagram and Facebook and give him some love, man. Share him around. He's got some cool stuff going on. You can find me at the TSG Bikecast on Instagram, and you can see our beautiful faces on the YouTubes at That Stoked Guy on my channel if you like to watch podcasts. So totally awesome. Anyway, love you all, and I'll see you out in the trails.